So, Kasich's out. Cruz is out. Looks like it's going to be Hillary and Trump. I love these little memes here. This one happens to actually say, still the election comes down to Hillary versus Trump. The Libertarian Party will be on the ballot in all 50 states. It'll be very interesting to see how many people would actually choose a third party. Now, I have several sources open on this subject. I have 3 in particular. Unfortunately, my internet's being weird today, so I can't switch between them. But I got this from the Tribunist, and what the Tribunist basically says is that when Gary Johnson was included in the head-to-head poll against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, he pulled a staggering 11%, which is amazing for a third party. And in order to actually compete with the polls for eligibility of the presidential debates, he'll have to be up to 15%, which I think he's probably near nationally right now anyways. And that graph you have in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, oddly enough, and we can only imagine how many data systems they had ready as soon as this happened to push this into the high ranks. The term third party and libertarian party supposedly skyrocketed on Google and Google searches thereof. Supposedly this on Google Trends, which is one of their analytic systems they use to run things. Now we know that Gary Johnson and John McAfee are going libertarian parties, and that the Libertarian Party last couple of years have actually been gaining momentum. So it'll be interesting to see, and I almost believe that Johnson will be able to partake in presidential debates against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I'll be honest, I really haven't heard much about Johnson. I've heard more about McAfee, and I thought he was the one that was actually leading. I understand that Johnson's the larger person, since he's a former Republican governor of New Mexico. But I think that it's quite easy to see that these guys are probably not the highest quality that the United States has, or that the people actually want and or trust. So it's quite honest. I still think the American people are going to vote Trump, but I still believe Hillary is going to win. Sorry, folks. She's a slithering snake, and I cannot believe that she is going to lose from one rationality or another. But let's actually do some fantasy work for a minute, shall we? Let's say beyond a reasonable, a third-party candidate actually is able to rise to power, and let's say he makes it into the actual presidential debates. Let's just say that it doesn't matter at this point what the sex of the person is, race, or etc. Even though we know Johnson and McAfee to be white men. Let's just say that this was able to happen. This is a good thing, folks. The Libertarian Party is a good thing. Unfortunately, I think that they've kind of been taken over by the big lobbyists and stuff a little bit. You've seen a lot more of their PR work, which is very good, and I know they haven't been taken over, but I'm just talking more along the lines of you've seen more about these guys the last, I don't know, probably better part of 5 years than I remember seeing. So I think this is kind of a political agenda to push a third party that the bankers can control. Sorry, folks. They don't rise to power without having some kind of consent from those who they're being governed by. I want to believe the difference, too. But let's say that, you know what, let's just say Johnson and McAfee decide to go head-to-head and put their numbers together. Let's say Johnson has 11%, McAfee probably has 5 or 6%. You put both of them together, boom. you match up the 15% needed to meet presidential debates. All right, cool. Now what do you got? All right, now you got a candidate who will actually be able to go head-to-head with one of the two main parties. Remember, the parties aren't the government, folks. The parties are just the parties, just organizations which are normal that people pick from. Remember, democracy means everybody has a vote. But republicanism, or being a Republican, or being part of a republic, means everybody has a say, but we elect somebody to speak for the masses, who right now are basically raping the system. I'm sorry, that's exactly what it is. Every time you pay taxes, every time something goes up and another war zone gets declared and you don't see them closing down the war on drugs and the war on terror and getting all this shit done, rounding up the intelligence gurus and closing down the big banks in those countries that are harboring all this dumb shit. It's the same situation, folks. Now, what would it mean if by some crazy chance a libertarian could actually make it to the White House? Well, we know they're pro-2A. At least they say they are. Johnson and McAfee. McAfee believes in a small government. You saw all the slogans about how McAfee was trying to keep the government from intruding in the background and everything else. So, I think it would be amazing to actually see this come down, even though we know it might not do anything major. I'm hoping for a third party. I'm also still hoping for Trump. I still hope he holds his own, and I hope he kicks Hillary's ass. But in the end, folks, here's my problem, folks. You gotta remember, I'm a geeky person. I like numbers. I like analytics. He could actually win just by talking about all his business ventures. Say, look, in Kuala Lumpur, I built a golf course that was, a project of $285 million, and now it's grossing, $1.5 billion monthly or, annually or, all this stuff. And he says, well, that's how you deal with that country. And you go over to Japan, and this is how you deal with them. And this is how you deal with them. Remember, Trump did not make it because he was good-looking or because his family did have money, but I doubt very much that gave him a long list of political pressures. I think pretty much he's built his brand up from where his father had left it. And he's passed that down to his kids. So really, despite what you want to call Trump being a redneck in billionaire clothing and everything else, he's actually built the brand for himself far bigger than his father could. Or I think even his grandfather could, depending on how many generations it goes back. So to think for a moment that a libertarian might actually become president, which I think at this point is not going to happen under any circumstances, but I'm just thinking that it would be nice to have the debate open to him. Let's see here. I have the Google searches, which I told you about. There's a Facebook meme, which I showed you on there. And then my Tribunist basically just goes back and talks about how the average being talked about, Johnson, and the third-party option or libertarian option is on the table. I could see a lot of super delegates going for either McAfee or Johnson at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, Trump and Hillary do have to go before the super delegates. So eventually they are going to get picked on. Now, I think Trump is more of a person who holds his career stats in the background, and I think Hillary is one that really does kind of... She holds them in the background, but they're on the surface and ready for implementation. And I think that if Trump really wanted to shut her down for good. He could easily say, look, my brand is in 28 different countries. I don't know how many countries he's actually in. I'm guessing somewhere around 30. I'm not guessing anything higher than that. You know, when we were starting off in this country or that country, they said this was impossible. They said that was impossible. 2 weeks later, guess what? It was getting done. Why? Because I know how to work these guys. I know how to get things done. And that's what I'm going to do for America. And if he just starts dropping number after number after number after number and just starts talking about how he basically kicked the shit out of the odds, he'd be elected tomorrow. But he's not that kind of person. And then what I would do is I would get Hillary to start talking like that about the Clinton Foundation and what she's done. And we all know that her numbers are, they're probably up there, but you know, there are some shady things going on with them, but I imagine just as well you'd find some shady things going on in Donald Trump's, overseas stuff. I've heard some rumors, but you know what? You do business over there, that's what you got to put up with. So, this is going to be good, folks. This might just be worth voting. Like I said, I'm an election inspector for the current city I'm living in. We grossed, I think it was over 350% for the last election, and the actual election, I can't imagine anything less than 1,000 people coming in. I mean, it is going to be ridiculous, and we have, I forget how many cemeteries and various other things, but we have a couple of good commercial spots where there's a lot of land that's being used in the polling area. So this is actually quite good, because usually we get like 200 people or 250. This time we're getting like almost 720. The next time everybody's saying it's going to be like well over 1,200. I mean, the stacks of Democrat and Republican ballots we were going through were a couple hundred an hour. I mean, it was getting to be ridiculous toward the middle. So I can only imagine how this is going to look, folks. I don't see Johnson or McAfee getting it, but I would not in any way, shape, or form be anywhere near the process of them not being able to. If that's what the people want, and they're good candidates, which McAfee I've heard good things about, Johnson I've heard good things about, I could imagine Donald Trump picking up one of them as a VP and just completely solidifying over Hillary and just shutting her up for good.